Well, good day and welcome to you. It is September the 20th. And as always, I hope wherever you happen to be, you're having a great day. Of course, you're keeping healthy, you're staying safe, and you're helping other people stay safe in the process. Now, if you're new to this channel, my name is Gary Willing, and here on Search for Signs, we talk about the emergence of Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom. We talk about why are the Masters and the teacher coming back now? Why is it important that they're coming back at this particular time? And, of course, what does it mean for you and everyone else that they're returning? Now, I do want to point this out, especially for those of us who are totally new to these videos. If you look in the description portion of this video, you can find a lot of background information about what I was just talking about. I do recommend checking out the Share International website first. Now, I provided other links that talk about this story in their own way. I think they're important. I do think they add to helping you know more about this information, but you can find more in one spot by going to the Share International website. Actually, the most in one spot by going to the Share International website. And the link is in the description, of course. And with this information, because it's so broad, because it's so new to most of us, especially if you've never heard anything about the Masters of Wisdom, about Maitreya, and you want to know what the beep it's about, if you educate yourself on this, you can see if there's any truth to it for yourself. I'm not presenting this information to change your mind. I'm not presenting this information to create any kind of new ideology. It really is just for you to look at, for you to consider, and to see if there's any truth to it for yourself or not. And you can only do that by doing any kind of investigation. So hopefully you'll take advantage of it. It doesn't cost you anything to look into this information. Check out these links. It just costs you just a little bit of time. And you can sit on it, you can see if there's any truth to it for yourself, but hopefully in the end, it'll give you a little bit better, hope for the future, maybe feel a little bit more uplifted about, the problems that are facing humanity, and that maybe possibly humanity is going to get through this, time, this very tumultuous time. So hopefully you'll take advantage of it. Now, I do have a question to discuss, and it's, I think, an important question because it's in regard to Maitreya's biggest priority for humanity, the need to create peace. Now, if you'd like to ask a question, you can always post your question just like Joku Vane did by posting your question in the comment section of this video. You can always comment as well. Now, when it comes to comments, I'll either address it or not. Just depends on whether I think it's pertinent or not. But you can always change your comment to a question by just putting a little question mark at the end. And then you're almost guaranteed that I'm going to try to answer it at least. So anyway, hopefully you'll take advantage of that too if you have a question. Like I said, I don't mind doing it. I don't mind asking questions. I actually like it when people ask questions. So hopefully you'll take advantage of that as well. But you can always answer your own questions by just investigating this information for yourself. All right. Now, in regards to the question, Joku Vane asked, regarding the latest world events, will there be a third world war between the West and China? My one-word answer is no. My slightly longer answer is there will always be a possibility of any third world war, whether it's between the West and China or anywhere else in the world that kicks it off, until humanity starts to see itself as one. And the only way to do that, according to Maitreya, is humanity must accept, look at, and put into practice the principle of sharing. That's the only way. Now, Maitreya says it like this: without sharing, there will be no justice. Without justice, there will be no peace. And without peace, there will be no future. So why is peace important? Okay, well, according to Maitreya, peace is important for two reasons. One is the most obvious, just like what you're talking about, a third world war, which according to Maitreya, any war can lead to a bigger war, can lead to a third world war, which would eventually be nuclear and would annihilate all life on this planet, human and subhuman alike. And that would obviously just kill it for everybody. If that happened, it wouldn't matter whether you were in a very, very secure military bunker inside a mountain or living in some off-the-grid place in the forest or the woods or in the mountains somewhere. You would die. They would die too. It would kill all life on this planet. would suck for everyone, obviously. So that's the most obvious reason why peace is so important. And then the less obvious, which I think is more likely if we don't institute the principle of sharing, is the environment, because we have to start to look at tackling the environment together and not separate, against one another, competing against one another. That's not going to cut it. And the only way to do that is to bring about goodwill amongst the nations first. We have to do that first. So if you're someone who's very concerned about the environment, I do recommend checking out Maitreya's biggest priority, which is the need to create peace only through sharing. And they talk about it on the Share International website, about the process of sharing and the need for sharing and so forth, because we're not going to tackle the environment until we do that. Now, to get back to your question, okay, so I'm assuming what you're talking about is this book that Bob Woodward and his associate wrote about the last and final days of the Trump administration, right? Is that what you're talking about? Where this General, I always want to call him Milley, but it's Milley, General Milley, was very concerned that Trump was going to try to start a war with China. Is that what you're talking about? Whether it was to that point or not, I'm assuming it was probably pretty serious that this general was thinking about this, but maybe he overreacted, maybe he didn't. I don't know. I wasn't there. But I wouldn't put it past him. But where the reason why I said no in the beginning, okay, where it's just that was my Woodward answer, would there ever be a possibility that no, is Maitreya himself a few years back said humanity has actually already gone past the tipping point on this regard when it comes to peace. Now, we've all heard that term, the tipping point, when it's referred to the environment, and thankfully we haven't gotten up to and beyond the tipping point of that. I do think the time is coming where we are going to be coming up to that. Now, in regards to peace, Maitreya said we are actually already past the point where humanity will choose war over peace. All evidence to the contrary. And it's because he says the hearts of humanity are sound. And within the hearts of all of us, he says, is the longing for, the desire for peace, for unity, for oneness, for justice, for sharing, even though we might not intellectually know it or believe it or see it in others or even see it in ourselves. He says that's there. It just needs to be kind of awakened. And that's why these masters are coming back at this time. That's why it's so important that we're coming back at this time. So he says because of that, humanity, the guarantee for peace is really there. But like I said, it's always a possibility, until humanity starts the principle of sharing. Now, you might have heard this, Joku, because you've commented on some videos, so maybe you've heard some of me talk about this in other videos, but other people might not. But is it true what Maitreya is saying? Without sharing, there will be no justice. Without justice, no peace. Without peace, no future. Is that true? Well, there's evidence to that, historical evidence. And if I have a link in the description for this where you can actually look at and watch a video talking about the Marshall Plan. Now, their take on the Marshall Plan is different, but you can at least look at it and kind of educate yourself on this a little bit. But because they look at it more from the United States was trying as a foreign policy to stop the spread of communism throughout Europe. So that's why they stepped in to help Western Europe in the way that they did with the Marshall Plan. But irregardless of what their intention was, it was, according to the masters, the first time humanity started the principle of sharing. Now, it didn't last very long, but the evidence is there that it created peace because we still have a peaceful goodwill relationship with those nations. And by we, I mean the United States. So when the United States saw that right after World War II, that if they didn't step in to help Europe as a whole, that it would be devastating because their infrastructure was totally decimated. A lot of the governments themselves were in shambles, and if left alone, it could create anarchy. It could totally destabilize the region again, and then that could possibly bring in a third world war and then it would be really bad because the United States had nuclear weapons along with the Soviet Union. So then that would have been, that could have ended it right then. So they stepped in, they instituted the Marshall Plan, And the Marshall Plan it was named after the Secretary of State who came up with it, George C. Marshall. But they took excesses of what the United States had and gave it freely to Western Europe. And then Western Europe rebuilt their infrastructures, rebuilt their roads, their factories, everything they needed to kind of get back on their feet. And then once they did get back on their feet, they gave excesses back to the United States in payment. So they didn't just take it, but they kind of borrowed it for a little while, they leased it for a little while, and they gave it back. So that's what the principle of sharing is. It's on a national and an international level. So had, let's say, the people of the United States gave money to aid agencies, and then they gave it to them, it wouldn't have brought about peace in the way that it did. It has to be nation to nation. That's the principle of sharing. That's how it's going to look globally. Now, the evidence that even the historians aren't looking at in terms of creating peace, and I wish they would, because the times that the United States has wanted to bring about peace in, let's say, the Middle East or in other parts of the world, if they just did this, it would actually do the same thing. The long-term effect of what the United States did after World War II brought about peace. The United States trusts those nations better than they trust any other nations on the planet. Those nations that participated in the Marshall Plan were not always friendly and trusting with one another, but now they have a goodwill relationship with one another, enough to, none of them have attacked anybody. The United States hasn't attacked England, England hasn't attacked France, France hasn't invaded Germany or vice versa. None of that's happened since the principle of sharing took place. So it does lend evidence to what Maitreya is saying. And that's why it's so vitally important that we do this. Now, the other part I want to talk about is in terms of our world leaders itself, which is, I think, why you're asking this question. But I live in the United States. I don't know where you live, Joku, but I followed American politics for a long time. I love American history, especially when it comes to presidential history. And I would have to say, out of the 46 presidents that we've had so far in this nation, I think I could probably name 4 off the top of my head. One would be a reach if I went for the 5th one, that actually understood the laws of life the way that Maitreya is teaching it. The first one being Abraham Lincoln, the next one being Franklin Roosevelt, the third one being JFK, and the fourth one being Jimmy Carter. Those are the only ones that come to my mind. And if I were to think of another one, maybe, possibly George Washington, maybe, but that's a stretch. I do think that the majority of the presidents that we've had, whether they've heard about it, known about it, didn't do anything about it, so therefore I would assume that they were ignorant of the laws of life. Now, if we looked at, we talk about the Bible from time to time in regards to the priorities of Maitreya and the teachings of Jesus. The Jesus that I read in the Bible, when I read the Bible, is one that talked about the laws of life. That it wasn't about believing in him as the one and true Son of God. Now, I know that people disagree with me on this, but that's the way that I read it. Okay? Now, the teachings of Jesus, the most important teaching of Jesus actually was, what you sow, so shall you reap, talking about the law of cause and effect. So Jesus, I think, was talking about oneness in that regard, because you couldn't truly have a law in the cosmos that what we put out, we get back. If there wasn't unity, if there wasn't oneness, it would not exist. If separateness was the truth, there would be no consequence for our actions. We could do whatever we want, whenever we want. And this is what people believe. That's why it causes so much pain and suffering in the world, the belief that we are separate, individually, group-wise, even nationally-wise. Nations think that they're separate from one other nations. That's the reason why I can do whatever I want. It doesn't hurt anybody else. As long as it makes me feel good, then I'm great, right? But there's no truth to that. We're all creating karma from time to, moment to moment. It's whether we're creating karma that's harmful to us because we're harming other people, or it's creative, loving karma that comes back our way because we're starting to see each other more as one. This, like I said, applies to nations as well. Now, the other thing I think that Jesus talked about when he was talking about oneness, is when he was talking with his disciples and he said, when I was hungry, you gave me food. When I was thirsty, you gave me drink. when I was in prison, you came and visited me. And his disciples said, well, when were you hungry? When were you thirsty? When were you in prison? And what was Jesus' response? When you do it to someone else, you do it to me. He was talking about oneness in the same way that Maitreya is talking about oneness, but Maitreya is talking about it on a global scale. But our world leaders, by and large, are totally ignorant of that law. They live and lead their nations to the brink of destruction because they're ignorant of that law. And so even rattling the saber, as they like to say, destabilizes the relationship between that nation and the other nation. So as Maitreya starts to talk to our world leaders more and more, because he's starting to engage us more directly, he's going to influence the people. He's going to be the mouthpiece for the people, what we all want, which is peace. He is going to galvanize humanity in a way that the world leaders will no longer be able to ignore the will of the people, which the will of the people is truly that they want peace, they want sharing, they want justice. These aren't new concepts. These aren't concepts that Maitreya has to teach us. They're innate within us. He's just going to wake up that innate sense about that truth that we have, that's on the tip of all our tongues. He's going to wake that up to where our world leaders can't ignore that anymore. And then if you look at and put in this other piece of the puzzle in terms of the Day of Declaration, and Benjamin Creme talks about it at great length if you go to the Share International website. But there will be a time, now Maitreya is speaking on TV in incognito, not using the name Maitreya, but just speaking as an ordinary person. And he will do that up until the point where he comes before all of humanity and speaks to every one of us at the same time on the Day of Declaration. And that's when he's going to declare himself as Maitreya, the one awaited by all the world's religions and so forth. And his message to humanity will be given telepathically to all of us. We'll all hear it inwardly in our own head. It'll be a day like no other day, of course. But at that time, it's been said that he will give a vision to humanity, which will basically be the time that we have to finally step up and make the choice. But he's going to give us a vision from his perspective of what the world will look like if we don't accept the principle of sharing, which will end up being the total destruction on this entire planet. We'll all feel it. We'll all see it from his perspective. Because that's a future that's awaiting humanity if we don't accept the principle of sharing. And these masters see all the future as one. So they see what is never going to happen to what could very likely happen at the same time. So he'll show us that vision that he sees. We'll all see it. We'll all feel it. We'll feel the emotions of death on this planet in a way that we couldn't by just somebody telling us this. And then we will also receive a vision of what life will be like if we do accept the principle of sharing. And that will awaken humanity up in a way that just talking about it, like on this channel, can't even touch. You know what I mean? So when we all see it for ourselves, the good and the choice, then according to Maitreya, humanity will make the right choice. So that's why we're really past the tipping point in this regard. So my other part of the answer is fear and joy are equally infectious. When we watch the news, if it's about fear, it starts to infect us just like any other disease would. And you have a choice in your hands right now whether to be afraid or to have joy and have hope for the future. That's why I think it's important for us to investigate and look at these miracles, because these miracles have been going on for decades, are leaving people with a greater sense of hope. It might actually give you a little bit of hope for the future. So I would say don't, be concerned about what you see in the news, but don't get caught up into it where you're afraid that it's necessarily going to happen. Because just because it's a possibility doesn't mean it's a certainty that's going to happen. So, and then I want to leave us with this. I'm just going to read a last little bit of an article by Benjamin Creme's master, talking about the importance of unity. Okay, so This last paragraph is coming from the article The Search for Peace, which was written in June of 2010 and published in August of 2010. But the last paragraph, he said, "Men must realize that they are not separate, never were, and never shall be, that they are part of a divine and seamless whole which enfolds us all, to which in our own way we give the name of God. Men must realize that God is peace, is justice, sharing, and trust, and that their fear is also the fear of their brothers. Maitreya's task is to show men this truth and to remind them that at the core of their yearning lies the peace they all desire, waiting to be made manifest." And like I said, the only way to manifest that, or not like I said, like Maitreya says, the only way to manifest peace is to bring about the principle of sharing. So thank you very much, Joku, for the question, and I look forward to questions in the future. You guys all have a great day. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.